And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the press. Before I go any further, I just want to really thank you for this opportunity. We thought it important to touch base with you because when we started our justice transformation journey, Teresa Smart and I came to see you, where it was a scoping mission, and you were one of the people that added to the confidence to actually begin that journey in Nigeria. But of course, as you know, it's not a one-person journey. So my colleagues from the Hague are actually here. We're all from the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law, HiiL. And to my right is Dr. Sam Mueller. He is our CEO. And left here is Teresa Smout. She's the program director. She has a number of African countries under her supervision. And that's Army. Army, I'm going to try with your surname. Cohen. She's also, she stays at The Hague, but she is part of the Nigerian team. So they're visiting, and I just thought at this point, with everything going on with you, you are running for office, congratulations. But I also know you as a disruptor of sorts, a social impact disruptor. So I thought at this time when HiiL is having dialogues and looking more deeply into still increasing access to justice, being innovative with that, making it more people-centered. Oftentimes when politicians have their manifesto, when you get to the justice sector, it's generic, rule of law, things that are more institutionally worded. And we're hoping that this will also be the beginning. We're looking for people to partner with. If you weren't running for office, this conversation will be more about encouraging you to consider philanthropic gestures and investments towards people-centered justice and innovations in the justice sector, because I know you can make that happen in Nigeria. But since you're running for office, we're equally here to start the conversation with you about taking that forward. We're looking for as many, it's a movement, it's a global movement. Sam is going to talk about the global perspective of that, what's happening, how to take it forward. Perhaps when you are going about and talking to Nigerians, you bring it to their awareness that justice goes beyond the courtroom. We work with data. Even the collection of data, we're behind in Nigeria when it comes to the justice sector. That's also an opportunity for you, Your Excellency, to speak a different language, bring to the table the things that matter to the people. Not the usual, I know you're a lawyer, but not the usual courtroom, judge, lawyer type of model, but the model that actually brings justice home to the people in a timely fashion, makes it affordable and easy to use. I'm not going to say much more, but I am hoping that this visit will provoke that thinking in you, because we had an extensive discussion, like I said, when we came to see you in 2019. Because it's important I say that, because I don't want it to seem like the relationship started just now. When we saw you in 2019, you understood clearly what HiiL's focus on user-friendly justice and people-centered justice was all about, and you had your own ideas on how to make that happen. So again, I thank you for this audience. We thought we were going to, it was going to be something informal, but it also shows how seriously you take what it is that HiiL stands for. So I thank you very much for this opportunity as I invite Sam to pick up where I left off.
Thank you, Ijoma, and thank you, Your Excellency, for receiving us, especially at such short notice. I'm here for a week as part of a workshop that we're also organizing with justice leaders from Kaduna State, and it's fantastic to finally see you, because I have heard much about you. At HiiL, we consider ourselves friendly rebels, and I'm told you're something of a friendly rebel yourself. So I consider you my brother, and it's really good to be able to be in your house and to be here. Maybe I could just go to the big why we do this, and that's actually a very disturbing story in many ways. With a bunch of organizations we have about 4 years ago, we got together and we started looking at, how, if you look at all the data that's out there, what is the state of justice in the world? Given the fact that the community of states, including my country, the Netherlands, including your country, adopted Sustainable Development Goal 16, which has a very clear target: equal access to justice for all. And then when you look at the data, we worked with the World Justice Project, the data that HiiL has, lots of others, we came to the conclusion that 5.1 billion people in the world do not have adequate access to justice. 5.1 billion people, that is 2/3 of the world population. At any given time, a little over 1 billion people do not have a resolution for a civil, administrative, or criminal case that they have. That's 1/8 of the world population. When you look at our data, generally, people who have justice problems, only about 30% of them get resolution. 2/3 are still walking around with the problem now, or they've given up. They don't even try. When you look also at the data of how many people use, and I'm going to say something very friendly, rebellish now, but use judges and lawyers, courts and lawyers to solve their problems, it's only generally, globally speaking, max 8%. Max 8%, and usually it hovers around 5%. So there's a whole, I like to call them the 95%. The 95% doesn't go to judges, doesn't go to courts, but is still walking around, is in that group. And the last thing we found was pretty staggering. I've actually begun to make that part of a standard question I ask when I meet ministers of justice in the world. I say, who is the minister for the prevention of justice problems in your country? And the answer I always get is nobody. We only deal with cases once they're there. That's what the whole system is for. So we have a problem. We need to change this. And while we know that this is happening, we also know that there are amazing people in almost every justice system, and I've met many of them here in Nigeria. I'm meeting you now. I've seen really brave judges, civil society leaders, whatever, that are trying to change this because they feel something's not right, something's not really working. But they're bumping up against a system that for some reason doesn't allow this change to happen. So we need to disrupt something, and we need to change. More business as usual is not going to solve the problem. That's, I think, quite clear from where we are. So that's really what this movement is about. And we're slowly starting to figure out, what we could do. And in our analysis of the problem, we also looked at health and education. And when you look at the data, access to health and access to education has constantly improved over the last 40 years globally. Access to justice has actually gone down. What are they doing that we're not doing? And there are a couple of things, they're not completely comparable, but there are a couple of things that we could learn from that sector. And I think that gave us the first clues of where we should be going. And I'll just briefly share with you some of the things that, basically 4 main interventions, main things that we're starting to develop with this international movement, and that we're starting to do with Nigerian experts here. The first is data. You have to have data. You have to know who has justice problems, where do they live, how old are they, what income group, are urban, rural, everything. Because without data, you can't prioritize. Without data, you don't know whether what you're doing is working, etc., etc. So you need to build the capacity. We've had conversations today, talking about what if every state in Nigeria had the capacity to collect every year data on this kind of stuff. Wouldn't that be fantastic? That in itself would already empower so many people. The second thing is you need to work more evidence-based, which means lawyers like you, like me, need to start thinking, evidence-based working, need to start collecting things that work, interventions that work. What are the 10 things that really help if you need to solve an inheritance dispute? And what are 10 things that don't help? Just stop doing them. What are best practices for solving land disputes? What are best practices for solving employment disputes? You can start collecting them, just like in the medical sector, and you can start disseminating them to all the justice practitioners, so that when you have a complicated land dispute, you don't have the police, the judges, the tribal leader, and whoever else is involved, all doing slightly different things, because they're not working on the basis of a similar assessment of the things that work. The third thing, and this is where the real innovation comes in, and where undoubtedly you have ideas. You need to think of new delivery models to get justice to people. If you know what works, you need to get that to as many people when they need it, against a good price, so it's not too expensive, that's accessible at high quality. And right now, the only two delivery models that we really have are, a policeman, a law firm, or a court. And there's much more possible in the world today. And we know that because we've worked with a lot of justice innovators here in Nigeria who have tech platforms, who have AI applications, who've, high-tech, low-tech stuff, but who've really done amazing work in the form of new delivery models to get interventions that work to people when they need them against an affordable price. And that really would be an area that, where you could make massive, massive gains. And the last is perhaps what you and I are doing here today, is you need safe spaces in which leaders of the justice system could meet and talk and reflect and set goals and create political will and get things moving. We call that the enabling environment you need for both the data, both for the best practices and both for innovating. You need to change the environment that is now in the justice sector, which is hostile to change, doesn't have R&D funding, has very restrictive regulation. It's a hard world to work in as a social entrepreneur. So how can you change that environment? And for that, you need to be able to bring the leaders together in ways that are safe and that don't, for example, blame the lawyers or blame the judges or blame anybody, but that you could actually sit, have a constructive conversation, do that. And that's a lot of the work that I think my colleague Teresa is one of the world's experts by now in working with people in those safe spaces. Well, those are the 4 things that we're trying to promote, trying to work with in Nigeria, in other countries where we work, but also in this wider partnership. So we're also organizing ministerial meetings and really at the United Nations trying to get funding for this and trying to get this new approach going. It's much bigger than HiiL. We're one of the leaders of the pack, but there is a growing pack of organizations that are doing this. And I believe this is really the only way that we could even begin to achieve the important goal of SDG 16, the promise that we all made, for which we are lagging far behind. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm sorry if I was a bit long.
No, you have only 10% of your time.
I'll let you last. So let me also just greet all the leaders in the room and just say, for distinguished leaders, all protocols observed. But we were not expecting a formal meeting, as Ijeoma said before me. I just wanted to then share with you that since we last spoke, we've had 3 processes running in 3 different states in Nigeria. We started off in Imo State, bringing together justice leaders from across the key justice institutions, but also the judiciary, and local traditional leaders, really to talk about the data and informed by the data of the justice needs. So what key legal problems the average Nigerian was facing in their daily life, to set a vision of how that could change. So what would people-centered justice look like for Imo State, to set a vision that would then guide the work going forward for the next few years, and then also to work out what we call pathways. So how will we get there? Once we have the vision set out, how would we get there as a group of leaders? We did a similar process then also in Ogun State, again bringing all the justice leaders and the judiciary together in a room, similar, looking at the data, setting a vision of what would people-centered justice look like for the state, and particularly for civil justice. So this was a prioritization they set before the process began. And then how would we get there? And the leaders actually took much of what they agreed on in those dialogues. They implemented it. So a lot of progress was made after the dialogues. It wasn't just about having a dialogue, getting to a strategy, but they actually took it much further and they started implementing a lot of the agreements they made. And we're now in the middle of a process, similar process for Kaduna State. So tomorrow will be day one of our second dialogue, again bringing all of the justice leaders together, also the judiciary, also local traditional leaders, and the religious leaders, of course, together in a room, looking at the data, setting a vision of what would people-centered justice look like, particularly in the context of Kaduna, and then how will we get there as a group of leaders. And so we're really in the middle of that process, and we're looking forward to the conclusion and seeing much of those agreements then taken forward and implemented. So part of our trip this time is to say that we have some momentum now going, thanks to the work done in these 3 different states, very different from each other. And we've learned a lot about how to convene leaders at state level. How can we consolidate those gains and build further to a national program? So that is part of our visit this time, is to see really Nigeria being the front runner for the continent to learn from in terms of getting people-centered justice working really at the community level for people, outcomes, really focused on the outcomes for people. So when you, for instance, were talking about who do I go to, who do I talk to, we would go a little bit further and say, did you get the result you were looking for? Did you find the solution you were hoping to find? And were you able to then get on with your life? Because a lot of these justice problems and daily legal issues actually stop people's lives. They're unable to keep going, particularly if the issue at hand is quite serious. So that's where we go. We push it much further, and when we're measuring the metrics we use to measure progress, we're always going back to, was the solution that you were looking for, did you find it? And ultimately, in your justice journey, in your journey looking for justice, so a solution to your problem, to have the resolution you were looking for, cost, time, and stress are normally the 3 main things we look at. Was it cost effective? Was it something you could afford? Was the time it took sensible or reasonable enough? And was the stress, was it stress-free in getting to the solution that you were looking for? So reduction of cost, time, and stress ultimately. And that's what we call user-friendly justice. So let me stop there, and just to also thank you for believing in us back in 2019, really encouraging us on our journey. I mean, you gave Ijeoma and I tremendous, tremendous encouragement and support, and for that we thank you. And it's a real honor to be able to come and say to you, this is what we've done with the belief that you had in us and the guidance that you provided back in 2019.
Thank you.
Thank you.
in addition to many things that have already been said about people-centered justice, I want to add one more, which is creating justice systems that leave no one behind, so taking care that all the vulnerable populations as well benefit from the justice systems and get the outcomes that they fully deserve. Thank you again for welcoming us so warmly.
Thank you.
Justice is at the center of everything we do. And once you have justice, then you start solving the problem of society, right? Even property, inheritance, and everything is problem of justice. So the issue is, how do we deal with this matter? So that's why it gladdens my heart to know that such an institute that is interested in justice is operating, and that my friend has been dealing with you since 2019. It's quite interesting, because at the center of his campaign is justice. So I'm trying to be the president of Nigeria because I want to install justice, because at the center of justice, you start solving the problems of society. Initially, talk about alternative system of resolving conflict, but from what you said, it's not enough. If only 8% of Nigerian population or any population in the world are those who even have access to justice, then it's quite disturbing. Now you can find that even within that 8%, within the 8%, not more than 0.00 point whatever eventually get justice. Because to go to the legal system, you must have the resources to be able to hire the lawyer and to go. Even at the end of the day, when justice is not provided, you don't know where to go next. I had an encounter with a judge sometime. There was an encounter in which both of us were involved years back, about 2004. So during the cross-examination, one of the judges says, now, Senator Oba, what do you define as justice? Now we are talking purely in legal terms, going to court and getting it. So I told him that for me, justice is when you give your judgment, both the winner and the loser will be satisfied that justice has been done. If after you've given your judgment and somebody is weeping and crying somewhere, then you have not done justice. Because in the local parlance, when you go to the local community, traditional community, right? When there's any issue, they try to provide justice. That's why there's a title you take, you will tell people, I can never lie. Once I've taken that title, I will not tell lies. But all these things have been disrupted now, and injustice is in the increase. So anything that is being done to provide justice, should be encouraged. Because once you do that, if you take our country, for example, now, people are crying about marginalization. It's issue of justice, because if you feel you are marginalized, it means that injustice is visited upon you. Some people complain about lack of inclusion. It's also the issue of justice. When there is no bread on the table, it's the issue of justice. While some people are eating and throwing away, right? The way things are going right now, even people don't throw much away anymore. So even those who can go and grab the crumbs, they have nothing to grab. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's a very critical subject matter, which must be given. Anybody who is serious to turn society around will hinge it on justice. Even the Russian-Ukrainian war, at the center of it is justice. Even in the church, issues you get, between the congregation and the issue, justice. And that's why most of the time people talk about due process. This is a way of trying to come close to applying justice. But in most of the cases, it doesn't even apply. So you must understand the system for you to be able to ensure that due process is followed. most of the time due process becomes a non-due process. And once that happens, injustice flows. So at every level of society, even in the family, between husband and wife, father and children, issue of justice. When you have justice in a family, there is peace, right? When there's no justice, there's a crisis, between the husband and wife, children and father, mother, because there's no justice. Because your children may feel that you are giving preference to a particular one, but when there's manifest, let me use the word, manifest justice, people relax. They can go to sleep with their two eyes shut, knowing that somebody there is impartial and making sure that, I can keep going on and on, but let me stop so far, so that as we go on.
Dr. Barbara?
While I went about the pursuit of, the human rights in Delta State, I saw quite a bit. And when I mean I saw quite a bit, I saw quite a bit. And, the other time I used the word alarming, the first assignment I took on was to visit the 5 prisons. Now, the nomenclature has changed. I hear it's, was in correctional services. And then I began to wonder, what is correctional about what we have today? It was heart-wrenching. I cried, I wept, and I sought audience with the Attorney General of the state a couple of times to see to the fact that things were done properly. I saw people. Let me share, MJ's story. I actually had in mind to run a campaign. He was this 10-year-old child who had no one, and then he ended up being put in the juvenile correctional center. And then I saw that this child's life went worse than before he was brought in. And then I began to pursue, and then sought to seek justice for him. Well, the story still remained where it was, as at the time I was in charge of Delta State, on behalf of the International Human Rights Commission. The question becomes, who oversees whatever budgets that are put in place or set aside for cases of this, children like this, like correctional, like reorientating them? I sought to see what's her name? One of the commissioner in charge of the juvenile center at the time. And these children, about 6 of them were left in a place like the wilds were all around them, mosquitoes. It was disheartening. As a mother, I felt, no, this cannot happen. I pursued it and even applied my personal funds. So the question again becomes, who is speaking for these persons? So after that, I said to myself I was going to do something a little outside the box. So I took on a project. I themed it Thrive, the Human Rights Africa pageant. I'm still on it. I thought by so doing, with the endorsement of the National Human Rights Commission, I'm so bent, I am really so bent to seek justice for everyone who is deprived socially, economically, politically, and, academically, and even fundamentally, because, justice transcends all of just these few things that we have analyzed here. My take. I'm not backing down, even though my children tell me, hey, Mom, you can't do this in this country. But with all of these likes and you, my hope is heightened. Thank you.
A man saddled with the responsibilities of protecting the lives of others, and he failed to discharge that responsibility, feels just to do what he's doing. And so the jurisprudence of justice is so elaborate that it tends to confuse the human mind. But I understood the purpose of this group to be trying to generate data and offer solutions to access to conventional justice. But for me, I think if you want to interrogate justice, the appropriate audience should be those who are saddled with the legal and constitutional responsibilities to discharge the burden. That is the origin of justice itself. Because what we are discussing basically now is victimology and not justice. We are talking about victims of injustices. And that is victimology. And victimology in the Western jurisprudence is a cause of its own. So there is a mix-up here within our own claim, because victimology is now considered as justice. But I think we must center the discussion around the appropriate audience. And the appropriate audience are those who occupied institutional responsibilities, whether the judiciary, whether the law enforcement agencies, the traditional institutions. There are even cultural aspects of our lives as human beings that offends justice itself. When you even take a look globally, justice represents might and not what we are discussing here. Because any strong nation can move on its own without the Security Council resolution and annex any part of the world, mobilize its allies and its justice, and they reduce it to their own national interest. So again, what is the essence of the global community and the Security Council? If individual interests of nation states can result to anarchy. So I think fundamentally something is very wrong with the human mind. And my understanding of the concept justice is do unto others what you want them to do to you. That's my simple definition of justice. Anything you don't want anybody to do to you, don't do to another person. And if every human being will begin to live with this type of thinking, the society will be a better place and will not be taking the very high risks you guys are doing, trying to generate data. And so I will encourage your group to zoom your through-line more on the institutions and the official saddled with the responsibilities. If they provide education, if they secure the society, if the economy is functional, if there is peace, all these indices we are discussing will be nowhere easy to be found. Because in this country, when I was growing as a young person, some of the very dangerous situations we are dealing with now were never contemplated. If you had told me some years ago that it's going to be impossible for me to move from one point to the other, I would have said, yeah, you are mad. I do drive in this country and stop in the bush if I'm tired, park my vehicle, calm down, bring out the mat and lie down in the bush, sleep and wake up and continue. You can't try that now. Even applying your brakes means you are already kidnapped. So who has the responsibility of ensuring that I enjoy those same rights I enjoyed before? And that deny me those rights now? Is it the justice of the situation? So I think we should interrogate the appropriate persons. And I will urge you to expand the frontiers of your work and obtain access to those who are in charge of what they are supposed to do right and are not doing it right. But visiting the communities or the correctional services, you are only visiting the victims of injustice. And I want to commend you for the wonderful job you've been doing. And to tell you that we on this side, fairly by thinking and action, represents justice. In other words, we try as much as possible to do that which we think or expect every human being to do to us. And to me, that represents justice. So as you continue with this very wonderful work that you started in 2019, I hope the statistics will be available for him in 2023 when he becomes president. And I will pray that the statistics will not find its way into the archives, just like every wonderful ideas are cooling down there. Thank you for coming, and God bless Nigeria.
The work that we are doing is very important work. It's an eternal work. It's a journey that has no destination. So we have to enjoy the journey, because justice is an ideal. And like most ideals, they are elusive. The usefulness of the ideal is that it's a horizon towards which we travel. It keeps us traveling towards it all the time. Justice is a cosmology, as I will call it, because it defines the entire essence. It's an ecosystem around everything that we do. And the way we fight for a cleaner environment, we fight for the entire solar system around which we live, the same way we have to protect justice, because it's inside us, it's around us, it's above us. We are just, for those who are religious, we are in the secular realm trying to do the work of the divine. That's how I see justice. Now, justice is different from the legal process. I'm trained in the legal process, and a lot of my training includes an effective way to prevent justice. So that if you have a case that has that intersects justice, I can put legal obstacles in your way to say your case is out of time, your lawyer used the wrong language, you did not pay the right fees, and your witness is not admissible in court, and all of that. So much of the legal system is defined and designed to limit access to justice. So, and for lawyers, you would think the minister who just spoke is a lawyer. He's a very good lawyer, I can tell you that. And he being a very good lawyer is a problem of justice, because he can use a lot of his skills to stop justice from being done. And the people who are trained at the highest echelon of justice, even though we call them Chief Justice, but is technically the chief jurist, the person who can explain to us why justice cannot be done in a particular case. And when we understand that, and society will go to a point where we would know that having more faculties of law does not make you closer to justice. So you could start by having a faculty of justice. And then you interrogate what is justice. And many components of justice go beyond the law. We have social justice, we have economic justice, now we have environmental justice, we have all sorts of justice. But the challenge we have is that the mechanism for enforcing any of these manifestations of justice relies on the legal infrastructure. And the legal infrastructure itself is a barricade because of the history of the world, the relationship of human beings with land and with property. And these courts are courts set up by those who are in charge of society, and society itself is not just, and the legal system is set up to keep law and order. And law and order is not even a cousin of justice. They're not even from the same town. So they only met at the bar. So, and that is what we need to understand. And if we are rethinking, then we can start to look for resources that will aid us in our search for justice. One, we have to understand that traditionally, you will find in Nigeria that there was a time where we didn't have many laws, but we had more justice. Because at that time, we were not doing justice according to the law. We were doing justice according to the conscience, according to the morals of society. Then we saw that we could have laws or legal system, and then we embraced the law and left justice behind. So it's good that now we are reminding ourselves that what we need is justice, and we can do justice outside of the law. Secondly, the way our law is written in this country, the most important document in our legal infrastructure is the Constitution. And our Constitution wants Nigeria to be the most just country in the world. And if you pick up the Nigerian Constitution, it gives you immediately, if not the most just country in the world, but it gives you a candidate country to be the most just country in the world. But like all things Nigerian, there's some intervention there. There is a chapter 2 of our Constitution. If you study that chapter 2, it's called Fundamental Objectives and Directive Principle of State Policy. Now, that, if we follow it, we will be the model country for justice. However, it's written there that it's not justiciable. So you cannot challenge anyone for violating it, even though in our oath of office or an oath of allegiance, if you take any public office, especially the one I seek, office of president, you must subscribe by oath that you will enforce and execute and observe the chapter 2 of the Constitution. But if you do so, you would disappoint politicians and political leaders because you would have a very just society. And I have senators and important people with me, they have never lived in a just society before. And they make very beautiful laws. You spend 4 years in the Senate, make very fantastic laws, very efficient laws, including maritime, these are our cabotage and many other things. But even our senators, our bishops, our permanent secretaries, they are afraid of a just society. So, and as a lawyer, I am going to be jobless in a just society. So all of us combine together to sabotage justice by putting a clause in the Constitution that you cannot enforce chapter 2 of the Constitution. But I think that it's time now to do justice by enforcing it. And in my time, I make sure it is enforced. Now, in the concept of justice, justice has failed. Immediately you enter the court of law because you are now dealing with a wreckage. So if you are an expert in saving human lives, I don't think the best day to start is to say, I will wait for people to have very serious accidents and be terminally ill and about to die, then I'll take care of them. people who wanted to press their advantage in society were coming to me. But people who wanted justice counted me out, that it's too expensive for me, it's too esoteric for me, it's too elitist for me. So we had to create a department in our office. We were offering legal services, free services. And we found out, I wish Sandra was here, she's heading that department now. We found out that when we went out offering them justice, they told us they couldn't pay. We said, don't bother to pay. But they were not used to us. So our free legal services were being examined with suspicion. That, okay, do you know? And it took time to get prisoners, ordinary people, to talk to us about their issues. They were not dumb. They just looked at us and looked at our entire profile and all the academic gowns and said, look, these people cannot be for us. Maybe these people are doing an experiment and they need us, so they were not opening up. So we went to a point where we scaled up our involvement and devoted some chunk of our income to servicing them and paying to service them. So, for example, we discovered that I could file a very complex legal brief of appeal to deal with someone who has been wrongly convicted. But it's faster for me to pay the fine and get the person out. So I pay the fine and get the person out, then I now face just the clearing of the person's name. So these interactions shows to me that I was well trained, brilliantly trained to work against justice. And that is true of many accolades that lawyers achieve in this country. The higher you rank in the profession, the higher you are on the bench, is a mark of how much injustice you have allowed to happen. Because the system is defined that way. So each day is a travel further away from justice. So now we need to make a U-turn to try to travel towards justice. And if we do that, three things are going to be clear. That, well, maybe legal knowledge is not really that, it's not as valuable as we rate it. Two, that justice itself is done at a retail level. And that the most place to do justice is bilateral, between two people, when they are interacting and when they are dealing with each other. And three, that institutions are supposed to serve the people, not the way institutions are designed. So if you want to start a business, for example, the law is set up that you need to register your business. But if you examine it very well, it's a form of injustice because the system is designed in such a way that the ordinary person who's trying to make a living is not able to make a living because he's asked to get the services of people he cannot afford. He's asked to take documents and licenses that limit their creativity and their access to economic justice without any formal access. So if a big business goes to incorporate its business and automatically knows it's going to go to the bank to get money, automatically has access to government contracts and other encouragements, and all of these things will marginalize the cost of compliance. So, because in a short while, the institutional support that you get and other access will compensate. But for the other person who is just outside trying to make basic snacks for school children, when he's asked to go and do registration or she's asked to go and do registration, it takes a large chunk of their income, but it doesn't bring any benefit. They have no access to training, no access to income, no access to anything. And then the city council, the government, every person is piling on them and shifting them from place to place. So now they have children. So they will default and have difficulty taking care of these children. There is no institution where she could take the children to and say, this child is hungry. But if the child stole a loaf of bread, there's a institution to immediately arrest the child. Because now, our legal system is set up to wait for you to commit the crime, but when the crime is inviting you and you are resisting, there's no institution to help you to resist. So in all of this long dissertation on justice, what I have that made me to be attracted to your program when Ijeoma and Teresa came was that you are dealing with it where the justice is being done. And you are using tools that people are familiar with. And the most difficult part of your job is the fact that you have to deal with those who have been working in the opposite direction of justice. And so you devote a lot of time, seminars, symposia, and all of it. And if we do not go to the people themselves to institutionalize this, these people are used to trainings and seminars on how to go the wrong way. So if you have 20 hours a year of training for them on how to go the right way, and they have 2,000 hours on how to go the wrong way, you have a lot of deficit to deal with. So I believe that if every institution, and that's why the media is here, the traditional institution is here, the legislatures are here, the politicians are here, the clergy are here, and the other people are watching us. We are streaming live as we are talking, so there are people who are already making comments on Facebook and everywhere. The idea is to give people a new thought regarding justice, so that you can't say, well, I don't work in the justice sector. Everyone works in the justice sector. But so then in the terms of philosophy, a country has to define itself not by GDP, GMP, foreign reserve, and all these other metrics. A country has to define itself related to how justice is delivered. How just is your society? If the metrics shows that you are not a just society, I said it about 3 weeks ago at a book launch, that justice cannot be imported. Justice has to be something you have to teach your people to have. And no country is too poor to do justice. And no country can say, well, I need a loan from the IMF, I need a grant from an institution to do justice. Justice is what you can do, because the resource to do justice is inherent in man. And you can do justice at the level where you are. And in my profession, we do a lot of things that are, when you measure them, they're quite ridiculous, but we love to do them. For example, if you talk to the minister in charge of the law, who we call Minister of Justice, but it's in charge of the law, minister in charge of the legal system, they will say that we have improved access to justice, we have improved justice. Why? Because they bought furniture for the courtroom and brought automatic translator for the judges. And judges now use microphones and things like that, that if you go to the ordinary person on the street, you will say, how is this relevant to justice? So you're coming, and the work we are going to do with you at non-governmental level now, and if it pleases God and Nigerian people, we have the mandate to govern the country, you would have the most just country in the world. Because the ingredients of doing justice starts from those who have access to state authorities, knowing that it's an agency and you are doing this work for the people. And the metric of how well a country is doing is how well the ordinary people in that country are doing. In many international fora, people ask me the question whether I'm from a developing or underdeveloped country. And I am bold to say that yes, I'm from an underdeveloped country. But my idea that convinced me that I'm from an underdeveloped country is not because of the size of my GDP, it's because of my measurement of what happens to the lowest person in my society. So there may be many countries with the highest GDP who are also underdeveloped, but they don't know, because They are looking at per capita income and all of those things. But I look at what is the fate of the lowest person in society. So I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen of HiiL, that we need help in our access to justice. Why? Not because we don't have the most brilliant lawyers in this country, but because the lowest people in my society don't have access to justice. And at a point, they were beginning to lose a sense of entitlement to justice. They created a different mentality for themselves that these people and their legal system and their court system is not for us. And even we who believe in it, sometimes we spend 20 years in court litigating 2 paragraphs in an agreement. We spend 15 years determining whether someone is innocent or not. So it's not working for us. So not only is it not working for those who are left behind, those of us who are inside it, it's not working for us. So maybe it will now give us incentive if we were not that selfless. The fact that it's not working for us, the elite, will give us the incentive to now understand what the fate of those who has never worked for is like. So we'll work with you in every way, and we'll keep in touch. Since we met, I've had several interactions with your country representative. We discussed many issues, and I propagated the idea to my colleagues in the legal profession and to anyone that I come across. But I believe that Nigeria will be the most successful country for you in all your travels, because it's a need that our soul calls for it. And our country will only know peace and be on the path to development when justice is so common and is within and around us. And I hope that at that time, you will use us as a good example for many countries of the world. I'm grateful for your coming, and I thank you, and I do apologize that we've taken a lot of time, but this is a very important subject. Thank you very much.